Are you interested in learning how to make a probiotic-rich fizzy tea called kombucha? I'm Tracy Long, a health and nutrition expert with Big Picture Health, and I'm here today with my friend Paula, who wants to learn how to make kombucha with us. So Paula, what inspired your interest in learning how to make kombucha?
Well, I've been hearing about it, and I've tasted it, and I'm very interested in good bacteria and probiotics. So I've been looking for an opportunity to understand how to get going, and it's Tracy.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm so happy that I get to be the person to teach you how to make kombucha. I've had a lot of fun making it over time. So let's get started, and let's start talking about kind of some basic ingredients. So when you want to make kombucha, you need to have a starter culture, and the starter culture is called a SCOBY. Have you ever heard of a SCOBY?
I have.
You have? Okay. It's a funny word. It's actually an acronym that stands for a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast put together. So that's kind of what's unique about making this fizzy probiotic rich tea, is that it's got this combination of yeast and bacteria. And the bacteria species can vary a lot depending on where the culture came from. But the yeast tends to be pretty standard. It tends to be always some Saccharomyces species and then some other varieties. But together, the bacteria and the yeast work together to increase the acidity of the beverage that actually minimizes the amount of alcohol that's produced. Because one question I get a lot is, do I have to worry about fermenting this and having, a really high alcohol content beverage? Most kombucha really is only about 1% alcohol because it's kind of self-limiting. But if you want to limit the amount of alcohol that's produced, then you would shorten the length of time that you're allowing the ferment to occur. So let's look at what we've got going here. In order to get a SCOBY, you can either grow one yourself, or you might have a friend or know someone who is already making kombucha. And when you are growing kombucha, it starts having SCOBY babies, and then you can share those SCOBY babies with people around you. And so there are some meetup groups around that are really into fermenting vegetables and fermenting teas, and they have extra SCOBYs available. So sometimes you can get a good healthy one from a friend, or you can grow one yourself. And I want to teach you today how you can grow one yourself, because it's pretty easy. Okay,
thank you.
All right, I got started before you came to save a little bit of time, but here in this glass measuring cup is 1 cup of brewed tea. So I used an organic tea bag, and I really am going to emphasize that you want to use organic tea. You can use black or green tea. We want organic because it's less likely to have pesticides or things that might harm the growth of those little tiny microbes. So that's a really important thing. Ingredients do matter. I used filtered water. It could be spring water, or I used filtered water because we have a filter on our sink right now that filters out chlorine, because chlorine's pretty harmful for little tiny microbes. I mean, it's keeping our water clean and clear, but it would actually maybe kill the microbes that we have. If you don't have a filter, one way to get around that is to take your water and you could boil it for about 10 minutes to boil the chlorine off, or you could set it out on your counter and let it sit overnight for about 24 hours, and the chlorine will just off gas out of the water. So you have some options there, but I used filtered water or spring water. And then here is about 2 tablespoons of sugar. So I made 1 cup of tea, added 2 tablespoons of sugar in the hot water to let it dissolve, and then I've let this sit here so that it can come down to room temperature, because heat is something else that will kill those natural yeasts and bacteria that are going to help us grow the SCOBY. And so what we're going to do now is just go ahead and take and pour, not quite, I made a little too much here. This is about 1.5 cups, and we want to put about 1 cup of this, essentially a sweet tea, in your canning jar. So go ahead and just pour that in your canning jar. I just want to show you how easy this is to get started, get going. Actually,
about that much?
You know what, go ahead. I think we can fit it all. Let's fit it all in and make sure we have that sugar in there, because the sugar is what the yeast and the bacteria are going to feed on to grow our SCOBY. And then I just picked up some kombucha from the grocery store, and this is a brand that it was on sale, and that's how I got it. And so we're just going to take this and just give it a little, don't shake it too much because it will fizz over when you open the lid, but go ahead and open that. And so this already has some of that nice culture in it, little fizzing up. Go ahead and dump as much of that as you can into the jar, filling it up almost to about with 1 inch from the top. Okay.
Out there?
Oh yeah, you can keep going there. Oh, we're gonna pretty much get it all in there. Yeah, oh, perfect. Okay. So then once we have this going, this now needs to sit for about 2 weeks. And in that time period, the bacteria and yeast that are in the liquid are going to start eating the sugar, and they're going to form what looks kind of like a rubbery pancake on the surface called that SCOBY. This bacteria and the yeast work together to form this cellulose structure that allows the organisms to grow and infuse these probiotics into the liquid that we're going to benefit from so much. Couple of tricks that I've learned by trial and error is that I've run into trouble by not covering this adequately. So you can put a cloth over it, or for Paula today, I have a coffee filter, and I'm just going to have her go ahead and put the date on this. That's important. So she's just going to write the date on the edge, so we know when we started. And in about 2 weeks time period, she's gonna start seeing we've got this nice, well-developed SCOBY growing on top. And then we're gonna rubber band it in place. And that is gonna keep fruit flies and flies out of your culture starter. And you'll see over here, here's a sample that I've made to show you today. This I started about 10 days ago. And you'll see that I also have added this houseplant sticky steak. And you'll see that I've started accumulating a couple of little fruit flies on this. So I keep this in place too to kind of minimize the flies that want to come and be around the sugar. So it's just a little tip that really makes a difference. So this is one that I got going, and this has been going for about 10 days. Normally I would give it maybe about 5 more days. But we've got a SCOBY forming on top, and when you look at that, you're going to notice that it's got some blackness to it right now. As it becomes more developed, it's going to get thicker, and it's going to become a little more yellow. Don't be alarmed at all about the black. We do want to watch for things like fuzzy mold. So that is not something we want. And also if you notice that there are any bugs, or in the case of the one that I grew a little recently, there was some larvae growing on it because some fruit flies got in it, and so we kind of want to avoid that. But once you get to this stage that you've actually grown your SCOBY, now we're ready to really make kombucha. And so now we need a big jar. And this is a jar that we happened to just find at the home goods store locally, and it was pretty inexpensive, but it's pretty cute, and it's got a little chalkboard on the front so we can write the date on it, and it's just kind of cute. The thing I don't like about it is that we're really not going to want to use the lid, because in order for the kombucha to ferment, we need to allow oxygen, and this doesn't fit tight, so you can get oxygen infusing through this lid, but it doesn't seal tight enough to keep fruit flies out. So we're still going to use that coffee filter, and the lid might be kind of more decorative. You can also pick up a gallon-size jar like this at your local hardware store. Sometimes you can find them at thrift stores. There's a lot of different vessels that you can use. But I got started here by putting in almost a gallon of that spring filtered water in our jar, okay? And then from there, I also earlier this morning took 2 cups of filtered water, brought it to a boil, and I added 8 tea bags of black tea. So it takes a lot of tea, and this has 2 cups of sugar. So here's a cup of sugar. So we have a lot of sugar in here. This is a very sweet tea. And I know that one reason a lot of people are drinking kombucha is that they're trying to avoid a lot of the, the sweet tea and the, all the sugar sweetened beverages. So I don't want you to be alarmed about the amount of sugar that's going in this, because the microorganisms are actually going to gobble it up and use it to create that fizziness and grow and make this probiotic rich beverage. So we're providing food for the probiotics that they actually eat. So the amount of sugar that's in the final beverage is really minimal. Okay, so that's good to know. So we've got 2 cups of water, and I misspoke, it's actually a cup of sugar in here. And so all we're gonna do now is just go ahead and add this to our gallon of spring water. Okay. And then I've washed my hands before we got started today, but then I'm just gonna reach in and I'm gonna get this SCOBY that we're growing. And like I said, this one's a little bit thin. Normally it would just be a little bit thicker than this, but it's kind of rubbery. I know it looks slimy, but it doesn't really feel that slimy. And it's got these, you know, black pieces that are hanging off there. No problem, don't worry about them. And then I'm just gonna take this, and it gets to sit right on the surface, and it's okay if it sinks. It will reestablish and float back to the surface. And then we want about a cup of starter. So this is our starter tea right here, and I'm gonna take just about a cup of this, and I'm just going to add that in too. So we've really got everything that this kombucha needs to get started. About a cup of it. And I'm not even going to worry about stirring it. I'm just going to let it sit there. You can see the little SCOBY I put in here floated to the bottom, and in a little while it's going to start eating that sugar, and it'll float back to the top and start growing. So we want to let this sit for anywhere between 5 days and up to 2 weeks. The longer you let it sit, the more it's going to ferment, and the more that it's going to have that potential of having a little higher alcohol content, but still not very high. The best way to determine when your kombucha is done is to sample it. So I always like to take a straw, and I just insert it into my beverage, pull it out, and I use that as a little sample, and I taste it. And I want to, you know, see if it's a little bit fizzy, and it's got mildly sweet and just a little bit of a sourness to it, okay? It shouldn't smell bad, shouldn't have any bugs or anything growing on it. And then I always want to keep this sealed, so I'm going to go back to using that coffee filter. I can put the date on this jar, or I can use some painter's tape and add a date, or I can even put a rubber band around this, okay? So that's basically how you can get going with growing your own kombucha. I did want to talk a little bit about different types of tea, because I've made kombucha in the past with black tea and green tea. These are my favorites, and we really want to have either a black tea or a green tea, Paula, because they have nitrogen in them, and it really encourages the growth of the SCOBY. I know there's some people that don't want caffeine in their tea, so it's okay to use a decaffeinated tea. It's also okay to use other types of tea like white tea, or this is one of my favorite teas, is a red tea. You tend to have a better result with your kombucha if you make about 25% of your tea black tea or green tea, and then you can add those other teas. I do want to caution you though about not using any teas that have any added oils or flavorings, because those can inhibit the growth of your SCOBY, okay? So I don't know, do you have any other questions about how to get started?
I wondered about the portions.
Oh, okay.
How much a person would use, and how quickly you would taste.
Okay, so after you've let this ferment for about, you know, we talked about kind of that minimum of about 5 days. This would just sit on your countertop too. You don't have to worry about putting it away somewhere. Start sampling it about 3 days and 5 days in. Most people like the results they're getting at about 5 days. Some people take it a little bit longer. But I do want to caution you that it's a probiotic rich food, and so it's important to ease into using kombucha. So you might start the first day maybe having just a little 4th cup or a couple of ounces of it, and kind of see how your GI system reacts. And if you're fine, you can start adding a little more. Some people will certainly have, you know, a full 8-ounce cup of kombucha every day and tolerate it just fine. And other people find that they just need, you know, a little couple of ounces and ease into it. Okay, so that's a great question to ask. So anything else you were wondering?
How often do you need to remove the SCOBY?
Oh, so good question too. And that's interesting in that as you continue making kombucha, you're gonna, with every batch, your SCOBY will make a SCOBY baby. And you can take that SCOBY baby and you can put it in your fridge, and you would take a little bit of your tea that you've got that's already cultured, and you could put a baby SCOBY in the fridge. You would want to give it about 2 teaspoons of sugar every week to keep it growing, but you could put it in the fridge and kind of keep it a little dormant and have it ready to go. And I recommend that for people who get tired of keeping kombucha going. You want to take a little break from it, you can do that. Or you could take a little bit of starter tea like this, and you could give a SCOBY baby to a friend. Yes. So that's fun to get it, you know, start sharing and create a movement around all the people around you with your SCOBYs. So did that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so every time you'll get a new SCOBY growing. I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about is kombucha for everyone? And there are some people that don't feel great on kombucha, and that is somebody who might have a yeast overgrowth. They might have an infection of, you know, something called candida Candidiasis albicans. If you have yeast overgrowth, there's a lot of yeast in the SCOBY culture, and so you might find that if you try kombucha and it just doesn't agree with you, you get headache or upset stomach or fatigue. Might not be the best choice for you. It's a good food, but not good for everyone. So listen to your body. And also, because of the probiotic nature and the bacteria and yeast combination, we recommend that people who are immunocompromised avoid kombucha. So that might be someone who's going through chemo treatment, has cancer, someone with AIDS, small children under age 4. So, but really anyone else certainly should give kombucha a try. And you can go to the local grocery store and just try buying some kombucha. Certainly natural grocery stores have it. You can, try it and see if, it agrees with your body. And if it does and you want to get started making it, we've given you a great example of how you can easily get going. And I'm also going to give you, I have a handout covering a lot of the topics that we covered today. So I'm going to send you home with this today and your starter tea. And if anyone else is interested in the handout, this is something that you can find on the blog at bigpicturehealth.com. And the blog is called How to Make Your Own Kombucha.